Seinfeld's gang never survived the plane. The Seinfeld finale is the most divisive series ending in sitcom history. A courtroom proceeding in which every person the gang ever wronged arrives to testify against them, resulting in a year-long prison sentence that the show delivers as its final moral verdict. The official reading is that the gang faced legal consequences for failing to help a mugging victim. The theory built across Reddit and film criticism sites says the courtroom never happened at all because the plane the gang boarded at the start of the finale never landed. The theory, first developed by Redditor Bitfitzik and later expanded in a detailed /film analysis, maps the finale's structure against the premise that the gang died when their plane went down over Massachusetts. What follows is not a courtroom proceeding. It is a cosmic judgment, specifically engineered to match each person's accumulated moral debt. The witnesses who arrive from across the country on zero notice, the judge who delivers a precisely calibrated moral verdict no real Massachusetts prosecutor could construct, the town of Latham, whose laws exist nowhere else in American jurisprudence. All of it is structurally impossible as a real legal proceeding and entirely coherent as a constructed afterlife reckoning. The final scene, all four trapped in a cell having the same meaningless conversation they had in the pilot, is not a punchline about unchanged people. It is their sentence. A psychological torture loop in which four people who treated every human being around them as an inconvenience are imprisoned together forever, each other's only company, with no exit and no possibility of growth. The show about nothing ended by revealing that nothing is exactly what they earned. Friends' finale was always Ted's story. The Friends finale is one of the most watched television endings in history. Rachel getting off the plane, the apartment keys left on the counter, everyone moving on from the building that defined a decade of their lives. The show delivers it as a satisfying, close, earned relationships arriving at their natural destinations, people ready to build something beyond the coffee shop and the purple apartment. The theory built around the finale's specific emotional architecture says the ending wasn't written by the show's creators. It was narrated by Ted Mosby. The Tommy Westfall universe connection, which places Friends and How I Met Your Mother in the same fictional world through confirmed crossovers, allows the theory to propose that the Friends finale is the story Ted has told his children about how a specific group of adults lived before he was born, sanitized through nostalgia, and structured to produce the specific emotional lesson he needed them to receive. Rachel getting off the plane is too perfect. Ross and Rachel reuniting at the exact moment everyone else's life also resolves cleanly is the narrative shape of a memory told to children rather than documented reality. Real endings don't produce this level of simultaneous resolution across 6 separate lives. The theory says Ted, who spends 9 seasons telling a love story that is really about himself, was always using other people's endings as the emotional foundation for the lesson he was building toward. Friends' finale is the story of how love was worth waiting for. Ted needed his children to believe that before he could finish his own story. Scrubs' final season erased everything. The Scrubs finale, in Season 8, is widely considered one of the most emotionally effective series endings ever produced. JD's fantasy sequence projecting futures for every character he loves, the show acknowledging that endings are imagined before they are real, and that the imagining matters as much as what actually happens. The show then returned for a Season 9 that most of its own creative team has described as a mistake. A reboot set in a medical school, featuring largely different characters, and functioning as a separate show wearing the same title. The theory built around Scrubs' 2 finales says Season 9 is not a mistake or a cash grab extension. It is the show's darkest statement about the nature of fantasy endings. JD's Season 8 fantasy sequence is exactly that, a fantasy. The futures he projects for his colleagues are not confirmations of what will happen. They are a man who has spent 8 years forming his identity around a specific group of people, unable to leave them without first constructing the version of their futures that allows him to believe the leaving is okay. Season 9, which shows a hospital that has moved on, a medical school that doesn't need JD, a sacred heart that functions without the people his fantasy preserved in amber, is the actual ending. The fantasy was what JD needed. The reality is what happened after he left. The show that everyone loved ended in Season 8. The show that told the truth aired in Season 9. Almost nobody watched it. The theory says that's exactly the point. Hyman's finale was always the plan. How I Met Your Mother's finale is the most reviled in recent sitcom history. a single episode that erased 9 seasons of character development by killing the mother, reverting Barney's growth, and ending with Ted pursuing Robin as though the preceding decade of story had never occurred. The showrunners defended the ending publicly by revealing that the finale had been filmed in Season 2 when the children's actors were young enough to appear in the scene, and that the story had always been building toward this specific conclusion. The theory says the showrunners are telling the truth, and that the truth is considerably darker than most of the audience was prepared to accept. The show was never about how Ted met the mother. The mother's identity was always a structural device rather than an emotional destination. The show was about a man who loved one woman his entire adult life, married someone else when he couldn't have her, had children who gave him a reason to keep going after his wife died young, and then used the story of how everything unfolded as the framework for asking his children's permission to try again. Every episode of How I Met Your Mother is Ted constructing a case for Robin to present to the jury of his own children. The theory says, if you watch every season understanding that Ted already knows how the story ends before he tells it, the show's entire shape changes. He's not looking back fondly. He's building an argument. And the finale is the verdict his children deliver after 9 seasons of deliberation. The Office finale is a documentary cover-up. The Office finale delivers one of television's most emotionally satisfying endings. Characters reuniting, arcs resolving, Dwight finally becoming manager, Jim and Pam moving forward, Michael Scott returning for a single scene that became one of the most discussed moments in the show's entire run. The theory built around the documentary framing the show maintains across its entire run says the finale is the most suspicious piece of evidence in the entire series. A documentary crew that has been filming a paper company for 9 years produces a television special that airs nationally and brings the subjects back together for a reunion panel. The theory asks, what actually happens to documentary footage gathered as part of a corporate investigation rather than a creative project? A premise the show's own internal logic supports through details scattered across multiple seasons. If the cameras were placed at Dunder Mifflin, not to make television, but to gather evidence, the finale's broadcast is the cover story deployed after the investigation concluded. The reunion panel, in which every character appears warm, resolved, and willing to speak positively about their experience, is what a legal settlement's non-disclosure agreement looks like when the subjects are allowed to appear in public. Michael Scott's appearance at Dwight's wedding, which the cameras capture and the documentary includes, is the most telling detail. A man who left under the circumstances Michael left under would not voluntarily submit to filming again unless the terms of his agreement with whatever entity commissioned the footage specifically required it. The finale gave you a happy ending. The theory says someone negotiated for it. Parks and Rec's flash-forwards were Leslie's imagination. The Parks and Recreation finale delivers its resolution through a series of flash-forward sequences showing every character's ideal future. Roy as manager, Niles redeemed, Keeley thriving, Leslie ascending to the highest levels of government. Every person lands in the best possible version of their future, arranged with a precision that real life rarely produces, even for people who deserve it. Show creator Michael Schur confirmed in a 2020 interview that the physical triggering of each flash-forward, occurring specifically when Leslie makes contact with another character, was intentional, and that the show deliberately left the question of the vision's reality open. The theory built from Schur's own words says these are not confirmed futures. They are Leslie Knope's imagination. Every time she touches someone she loves, she projects the version of their future she has spent 7 seasons working toward on their behalf. The evidence the theory uses most specifically is April's flash-forward, which shows her agreeing to have children despite spending the entire series being explicit, consistent, and unambiguous about not wanting them. Andy's sudden paternal enthusiasm reads as Andy, whose enthusiasm for everything is total. But April, agreeing to 2 children, contradicts every version of herself, the show built with unusual care across 7 years. The theory says those children exist in Leslie's mind, not April's actual future. The finale is the most devoted friend in television history, showing you what she believes everyone she loves deserves. Whether it happened is the question Schur left for the audience to carry home. Blackadder Goes Forth never ended with death. The Blackadder Goes Forth finale is the most devastating ending in British television history. The characters going over the top into no man's land, the screen fading to a field of poppies as the audience understands that everyone died in the assault. The show has spent 4 seasons across 4 eras building Blackadder's attempts to escape whatever predicament his era places him in, always surviving through wit and manipulation. The First World War setting makes escape impossible, and the finale stages the death as inevitable, the one situation Blackadder's intelligence cannot think its way out of. The theory built by fans who have returned to the episode repeatedly says the death never happened. The specific framing of the finale, the way the camera holds on the characters' faces before the whistle blows, rather than showing the assault itself, is the theory's anchor. The show cuts away before confirmation. The characters go over the top. The screen goes to poppies. The theory says Baldrick's plan worked. The one plan the show withheld from the audience, the one Blackadder cut off before Baldrick could finish describing it, was the plan that actually saved them. The poppies are not a memorial. They are Blackadder's garden somewhere safe, in the aftermath of a war he survived through a scheme so embarrassing he has never told anyone what it actually was. The show's entire comedic history, Blackadder always surviving through increasingly humiliating means, makes the theory's proposition the more consistent ending. He survived every other impossible situation. The theory says the show earned the right to let him survive this one too. Cheers' final shot confirmed Norm was trapped. The Cheers finale closes, with Sam Malone turning off the bar's lights, walking to the back, and the episode ending on the bar empty and dark. It is one of television's most deliberate closing images. A man alone in the place that has defined his adult life. The camera holding on emptiness after everyone else is gone. Across multiple seasons, the show built a specific relationship between Norm Peterson and the bar that the theory uses as its foundation. Norm enters Cheers in virtually every episode to the bar's famous collective greeting, sits in the same stool, and spends each episode in the same position he occupies at the episode's end. The theory built around the finale's emotional architecture says the final image of the empty bar is not about Sam, it is about Norm. Every other character in Cheers' final season receives a resolution that acknowledges their life outside the bar. Sam turns down the opportunity to be with Diane again and chooses the bar consciously. Norm's resolution is the one the show withholds. His marriage to Vera, referenced throughout the series without her ever fully materializing as a presence, has deteriorated across the later seasons in ways the show addresses through comedy rather than drama. The theory says Norm didn't go home after the finale. He stayed. The bar, after the lights went out and Sam went back, still contained at least one person for whom going home had stopped being an option. The famous greeting that opened every episode was the only place anyone was ever reliably glad to see him. Arrested Development never actually ended. Arrested Development's network cancellation produced one of television's most abrupt endings, a finale that was simultaneously designed as a series finale and structured as a setup for a movie that never materialized, followed years later by Netflix seasons that the show's own creator has described as an incomplete realization of what the story required. The theory built around the show's entire run says the ending was never the point, and that Arrested Development is the only sitcom in television history that was designed to not end. The Bluth family's dysfunction is specifically, structurally designed to perpetuate itself indefinitely. Every scheme generates a new scheme. Every resolution creates a new problem. Every character who appears to grow immediately demonstrates that the growth was insufficient by the next situation the show places them in. Michael Bluth, the show's apparent protagonist, spends every season attempting to disengage from his family and failing. His failure is not character weakness. It is the show's argument. Some families produce a gravitational pull strong enough to make escape permanently impossible for anyone born inside them. The Netflix seasons confirmed this reading by showing Michael, years after the network cancellation, in exactly the same position he occupied in the pilot, doing exactly the same things for exactly the same reasons, having learned nothing that altered his fundamental relationship to the family he has spent a decade trying to leave. The show never ended because the Bluth family never ends. The theory says the cancellations weren't interruptions of the story. They were the story. Some cycles don't resolve. They just pause between seasons. Saint Elsewhere's finale ended television itself. The Saint Elsewhere finale, in 1988, closes with a single image that the Tommy Westphall theory, the most expansive fan theory in television history, says retroactively ended 441 television shows simultaneously. Tommy Westphall, a recurring character on the autism spectrum, is shown holding a snow globe. Inside the globe is a model of St. Eligius, the hospital where the show is set. The camera pulls back. The credits roll. The implication is immediate and total. Tommy imagined the whole show. Every doctor, every patient, every storyline across 6 seasons existed inside the mind of a boy with a snow globe. If St. Eligius is a dream, every show that shared characters with it is also a dream. St. Elsewhere crossed over with Cheers. Cheers crossed over with Frasier. Frasier crossed over with Wings. Through John Munch, who appeared in Homicide, Law & Order, The Wire, 30 Rock, and Arrested Development, the chain extends across genre and decade. The theory, originally assembled by writer Tom Fontana and expanded by fans into an exhaustive database, concluded that the St. Elsewhere finale didn't just end one hospital drama. It ended the fictional reality of nearly every show that ever shared a character with any show in the chain. The Cheers bar doesn't exist. The Friends apartment doesn't exist. The 99 precinct doesn't exist. Tommy Westphal dreamed all of it. The theory says the most important finale in television history aired in 1988, and most people who watched it had no idea they were watching television end. Roseanne's original finale reframed 9 seasons. Roseanne's season 9 finale delivered one of television's most audacious structural reversals. Roseanne breaking the fourth wall to reveal that the entire 9th season was a book she wrote after Dan's heart attack killed him, that the lottery they won wasn't real, that Jackie was the one who was gay rather than Nancy, and that the family's working-class struggle never actually resolved the way the season depicted. The show spent 8 seasons as one of television's most honest portraits of working-class American family life, and then used its 9th season's fantastical storylines as a deliberate departure that the finale retroactively explained as grief-driven fiction. The theory built around this structure says the revelation doesn't stop at season 9. If Roseanne was writing a fictionalized version of her life while processing Dan's death, the threshold between what is real within the show and what is Roseanne's written version is not established by the season 9 premiere. It is potentially as early as the moment Dan's heart attack introduced the possibility that the family might lose him. Every plot development after that point, everything that seemed too convenient, too resolved, too warm for the actual financial and emotional reality the show had spent 8 seasons depicting, could be Roseanne's written version of the life she wished she'd had, rather than the life she actually lived. The finale didn't just reframe season 9. It handed the audience a question about every season, and then ended before anyone could ask it. Malcolm in the Middle was always Hal's breakdown. Malcolm in the Middle runs for 7 seasons as a family comedy, about a dysfunctional household organized around a gifted middle child whose intelligence makes him an outsider in his own family as much as his school. The show is warm, chaotic, and deeply committed to the comedy of parental failure and sibling rivalry. The theory built around Hal Wilkerson, the father, says the show was never Malcolm's story. It was Hal's, specifically Hal's sustained psychological break from reality, across 7 seasons of a life that was measurably overwhelming him in every direction simultaneously. Hal's behavior across the series escalates in ways the show treats as comedy, but that, watched as a documentary of a specific man's mental state, track against someone whose grip on conventional adult functioning is progressively loosening. His schemes become more elaborate. His departures from shared reality become more frequent and more total. His ability to maintain consistent adult responsibility narrows as the seasons progress rather than developing the way a character the show was writing toward growth would develop. The Breaking Bad fan theory, which proposes that Hal is Walter White in witness protection after the events of Breaking Bad, is the most circulated version of Hal's dark reading. The show's own DVD extras include a scene in which Bryan Cranston, as Hal, wakes from a nightmare, describing events exactly matching Breaking Bad's plot, produced as a joke by the Cranston himself. The theory says the joke confirmed the architecture. Hal was always a man with a hidden life. The family comedy format prevented the audience from seeing clearly.